December Learning Lab. I am Julie Kimball. I'm with Kimball Co., a commercial real estate services firm, and I am this year's president of NAWBO, Minnesota for another few weeks, and then I'll hand the reins over to Mary Youngren. So welcome and thanks for joining us. I'm going to do just a really brief introduction of our two presenters. I believe they're going to tell you a little bit more about their businesses, but I was trying to think of, I kind of think of them as like the digital queen and king. I don't know, all things. I know that they have a passion around digital content and social content. And I know, Allie, you say that you're passionate, for all things social. So this is going to be a great twosome coming together. And just to give them kudos, Allie is our awareness chair and Grant is an in-kind sponsor and on the awareness committee. And so they are a duo that has really, in addition to doing their day jobs, really been serving NAWBO. And if you watch it all, and along with Anna's on the call, Gordon's been working on that team as well, and just really elevating and bringing our social for NAWBO up a ton of notches. So we are really thankful for them. And I want to tell you that if in case they don't, they are really looking for some great committee members to join the awareness committees. So after you listen to them, I hope that that encourages you to want to get to know them better, both by possibly doing business with them, but also by working with them on the awareness committee. So with that, Allie Mann of Allie Mann Marketing and Grant Chandler of Marketing Tech Guide, I'm going to turn it over to both of you.
Thank you, Julie.
Thanks, Julie. That sounds great. Thank you for that warm intro. That's very kind. So Grant and I will go a little bit into our background on the next few slides here, but first let's talk about what we're going to talk about today. Social media, a necessary headache. It's a funny title, but it's also true. Social media has become one of those elements of marketing that is just something that has to be done. It helps legitimize your business. It gives you brand awareness. And at the end of the day, it can drive conversion of leads. So it's a really important part of a marketing plan. What we're going to talk about today is, I'm sure most of you already do some sort of social media or have some sort of account set up, or maybe you don't at all, which is also fine. But this presentation is meant to give you that high level of kind of how to do it for your business, like how to set it up, what to do before you start posting, and then how to execute on your posts, how to get your internal team ready, how to use external folks, things like that. High level things you need to know to be successful in social, but not so far in the weeds that it's overwhelming, right? Because there's a lot there's a lot to it, but it's definitely doable. So that's kind of how we're balancing the, like, you need it, it's kind of a headache, but you can do it. Okay.
And
so
Allie had to pull me back from adding too much detail to many slides. There's a lot of stuff to dive into with this stuff, and we don't want to overwhelm you, because it can, you don't want to spook you away from doing social media kinds of things. But what we're hoping to convey with this presentation is just that there is some nuance to it and some complexity, and that yes, it's a good thing to get right out the bat.
Totally agree. So saying my name again, I'm Allie Mann, founder of Allie Mann Marketing. My company really focuses on helping people find the words, people and companies find the words to describe themselves, all the way from upfront with naming, positioning, and messaging, to building out a social strategy, content strategy, and all the way through into execution. My background is in journalism and ad agencies. I've always been a writer, so that's the main skill set I bring to the table, but kind of rounding it out with strategy up front before we dive into the actual words. And the majority of my clients are in healthcare, HR, management, consulting, and tech. And there's some contact info there too if you guys want to reach out.
I'm Grant Chandler. So I've been focusing my whole career on kind of the middle ground between IT and marketing, and how to apply strategies from the business side to getting stuff done on the technology side. I've had my own consulting practice for about 6 years now, with Briarwood Consulting Services. And I've recently started Marketing Tech Guide, which is kind of the education side of that. Something I've been doing for the last number of years has been teaching through Normandale Community College for a web and graphic design thing. And it's taught me that I really like teaching. It's really a lot of fun. So Marketing Tech Guide is focused on sort of business focused technology things. We don't have any videos for sale yet, but we're getting there soon. But there's some good resources there if you want to check it out. I'm a founding board member for Money Weave Academy, working with Mary Quist Newens. And I think I saw Regina Barr is also on the board with me. I see her in the call today. And I'm leading the technology items there with that organization.
Okay, so let's dive in. Why should you be using social media for your business? So social media is one of those things. It started out, I'm a millennial, right? So I'm one of the people who saw social media arrive, and now it's become part of my daily life, which is an interesting perspective on it. But it truly is one of those things that's inevitable. If you haven't thought about it for your business, eventually you will, or you'll be forced to, or you'll want to because of the benefits it brings to your business. And that's what we want to get across here. It helps legitimize your business, and people, especially people who are in those younger generations like Gen Z, millennials, they look to social to interact with brands, to learn about them, to discover products, to connect with customer service if they're unhappy with a product. It's a huge space for brand interaction. So it's something to keep in mind for your business and to definitely utilize, but to make sure you figure out how you want to do it and when you want to do it and the way you want to do it before you just dive right in. So, whether you've been doing this forever or you're just getting started, we put headache in the title. Social media is time consuming, and it's good to know that up front. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of little things, and it honestly ends up taking more time if you don't put the plan and the structure in place up front. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about in the beginning here, is setting that stage to kind of set yourself up for success when you launch social media, because it can be really beneficial for your business. And the thing is, you can use it for many things. Lead generation is probably the most common use of social for business, especially like B2B businesses who are trying to connect with customers, client base, B2C, you name it. Social is a great place to get people to click on stuff, essentially, right? And this example here is, if you're going to use social for lead gen, you need to give them some sort of like, click on this, register for our webinar, sign up for our newsletter, and direct them back to your site somehow, or to content you've created. So you're providing value, but you're also at the same time getting information from them and, establishing a lead that you can put into your system and communicate with them that way. Another great use for social is brand awareness. There's some examples here, right, of companies that do a great job establishing their brand. So for example, customers like Nike and Starbucks, GoPro, right? They have a very established brand about who they are and how they want to look. They might not necessarily use social media to get clients, to remind clients or customers for that matter. But when people do come across their ads or their social media, it's very clear, oh, this is Starbucks, right? This looks like their branding. This feels like them. It's going to give you that feeling that lets you recognize and like resonate with who they are, but perhaps without like filling out a form, right? Or like diving into some sort of like CTA, because brand awareness is really just about like, this is who we are and we want the world to know it. And these three companies do it really well. Another example is thought leadership. So, and it's important to know that however you want your social media to work, it can be one of these, it can be a blend of these. Most likely it will be a blend. And honestly, if that's the way we recommend doing it, is if you're going to use social for lead generation, which is what most of my clients do, you can't just be talking about yourself all the time, right? And what you do, you need to connect with those readers and those followers on a different level. And you also need to be a thought leader. Let's say your company is I'll just use Nikki as an example because she's in finance, right? Like you can post all about the great things that you provide as a company, but you should also provide that thought leadership. What's going on in the world related to finance, right? Or there's a healthcare example here of people who post articles that are just good information and things people want to know without necessarily talking about how they address that in their products and services, right? Because it's just value added content for their followers. I think we can go to the next, Grant.
Skipping the stats slide.
Oh,
Or
yeah, sorry, it just popped up on my screen.
oh no.
Sorry, technical delays. So just kind of driving home that point of why you should be doing this are some recent statistics about social media and how it relates back to your business. As of October, 4.55 billion people are active on social media. Like that's a huge number. It's like a number that I can't even like rationalize in my non-math brain, but that's where people are at, right? So you should be in front of them. And 78% of consumers are willing to buy from a company after having a positive experience with them on social media. It's really powerful, right? If you, let's say, this has happened to me before. I posted something on Lululemon or sent them a message because there was a hole in a pair of my pants, and they immediately got back to me, sent me to a store, like connected me with an employee to replace those, get them fixed. Like things like that happen on social media. It's a dialogue and a conversation. And so those good experiences put you in their mind to keep coming back, right? To keep engaging with these brands on social. It's 55% of consumers learn about new brands on social. And 80% of business executives think it's very important or essential to invest in adding additional resources into your social media marketing. So it works. It's not going away. It's definitely beneficial to your business, but again, depending on how you execute. So let's talk strategy. Social media, not quite an area where you want to dive right in. It's more of a dip your toe in approach. That said, come on in, the water's great. This is what I do for a living, right? So obviously I love social media and I believe in the power it holds for businesses. But it won't be successful unless you put these thoughtful plans into place before you start posting. So what does that include? Well, who are your targets? Who are you trying to talk to? Is it customers? Is it, just friends and family? Is it just everyone? Is it a certain target who you're trying to get to buy your product? And then what are their pain points and their needs? What are they looking for from you as a brand or a company or as someone who they want to engage with? All that stuff needs to be figured out and documented. And usually if companies have done the exercise of, positioning and messaging for your own marketing copy already, that will lend itself to this, right? You likely know who your audiences are and what they need. And that applies to social too. And when you're deciding what channels you want to be on or what campaigns you want to run, that also ties back to audiences. Certain people are more active on certain channels. Certain demographics are more active on different channels. Certain industries look for certain content on different channels. It all needs to be built into your plan, right? Because if there's a certain channel where none of your targets are really there, you don't need to be there, right? I mean, you still can, but it's going through that thought process of figuring out where am I going to get my most bang for my buck for how I share content. Engagement strategy. Social media is not something where you can just like set it and forget it, post it, like we did it, we're done for the week, because people are going to comment and respond and we want them to, right? Even if it's negative, when people are engaging with your post, that's what we want. That means they're paying attention. You've said something that sparked something in their brain because they're clicking like or comment or whatever. So you have to talk back to them, right? And we'll get into a little more detail later, but when you're first setting up social, these are the things you have to think about. Sorry, Grant, were you going to say something?
I just wanted to chime in on that one with the engagement stuff. Even if you get negative comments and things, the algorithms of the social media platforms are going to make your post show up higher if there's more interaction. And so all of the comments and any kind of stuff you have on there is going to be very, very positive for that post being seen. Mm-hmm. And sorry for interrupting. I just want to throw that little tidbit in there.
That's great. He's right? Like it's just very important to be aware of the interactions and things that are happening to your post, not only for that algorithm, but also just to really be, providing your customers and your clients with that conversation that they want. Follower strategy, like how are you going to grow your network on social? Who are you going to follow? Who are you going to share, retweet, repost? Because when you tag people and connect with people and get involved in the conversation, this just continues to build your presence on social. And then content, what are you going to post about? What content do you have created already that you can utilize? What content do you need to create? What kind of content are you going to want to use? Things like that. And then figuring out what kind of social media approach you want to take from a paid versus organic. For today's purposes, we're just going to be talking mainly about organic. Paid is a whole different animal. It really lends itself to lead generation based social media objectives, which is probably true for a lot of people. Grant and I even joked about perhaps we do a part 2 of this or something where we talk a little bit more about paid, but really just trying to focus today on, for companies who don't maybe have the time and resources to dive into paid, but you need to get your social presence going, that's where organic's going to work best for you.
Allie, can you explain a little bit more about what you mean by organic?
Sorry, I get so deep in this and I forget that those terms don't mean the same to everyone. Organic means it's social posts that you're just creating and posting on your page. Paid is an ad you can put on social, like the ads you'll see on LinkedIn. It looks just like a post most of the time, especially on things like LinkedIn and Facebook. Instagram, you can tell when it's an ad. But paid social media is when you pay to have a post show up in front of certain audiences a certain amount of times. And they'll usually be like a form they can fill out with contact information. I mean, it's a great strategy for lead generation, but it's a whole other animal. But if it's something that is going to be important for your business, this is the time at that strategic part of the process where you set that up, right? And make sure you figure out how you're going to do it, what campaigns will be paid. It'll tie back to what audiences you want to talk to. But organic are going to be the posts that you post just on your page, on your account. They don't cost anything, right? Unless you're using a vendor to post them, but just the ones that come straight from the horse's mouth. Set yourself up for success. So above all, don't build aimlessly. It's very important to know what you want to accomplish from social. This goes back to the beginning. Are you trying to get new leads? Are you trying to just get your brand out there so people learn about who you are, but you're not quite ready for leads yet? Are you just trying to network with people? If so, whatever the goals are, create clear objectives, document them, create a strategic plan, put it in writing, and then keep yourself accountable to it. Set measurable goals, right? It can be anything, like maybe we want 2 new followers a month, or we want 10 people to visit our website each month, or we want 2 lead conversions a month. It can be anything you want, but set some sort of goal so you know how you're doing and how to change your approach going forward. And the goals should be attainable, right? If you're a 10-person shop and you have 1 person who does your marketing, you're probably not going to be able to do daily posts on 3 channels and then be able to engage with all those people, keep those posts consistent, because it's time consuming, right? It's fine however you want to do your social approach, but just make sure it's something that you can accomplish within your own organization. And whatever you're going to be doing, establish the analytics you want to measure from those goals and implement a tool to help. Analytics are they're their own animal. Grant will talk much more about that later. But figure out, like, if you decide you want to have 20 website visits a month, you're going to need a tool to help you figure that out, right? On the back end of your website, figuring out where the people came from. This all has to be thought about up front. So you're not just posting and building all these social channels for nothing. It's good to know how we're doing. I typically like to prep content a month in advance for a client, and then we'll say, these are the posts for your month of January. Go through it, make sure they all have everything you need them to have, which I'll get into in content later, but just prep your content in advance. And I wouldn't leave it to chance that you're going to just go on a channel and post every day. It's better to have a very detailed plan, but also be aware that there will be things that go on that you're going to have to post in live time, right? That's its own strategy. But for your content that you've prepared, you need to have a calendar, a plan, create social media guidelines so that people know this is what we do talk about on social. We never talk about this. We always respond to comments within 24 hours, blah, blah, blah. It can be anything, but having that guideline so both your internal staff or the vendors you work with know the do's and don'ts for social for your company. And like anything, reevaluate your plan often and change as you need to, as social and the world is always changing.
All right, we're going to talk about execution now. So I think this is, we put this in there, I took this out of one of the slides, that quality and consistency is better than quantity and frequency. That is a really good mantra for all of your social media work, because it can be a grind, you know, doing something consistently for 6 months that isn't directly bringing in dollars. It's indirectly probably bringing in dollars. It's tough to stick through. So you really want to set up your execution plan in a way that, you know, don't set your goal so high and your frequency so high that you burn out on it right away. So as we get started, we will want to put together some kind of a similar plan. This is a very high level plan, very much would be customized and stuff, but this is kind of generally how you'd go about it. So firstly, you want to evaluate the resources you have. Do you have someone internally? Is this someone, a new responsibility for someone else already on the team? Are you hiring a vendor? Are you hiring a vendor for part of it? You know, those kinds of things are going to really weigh into how you set up your strategy, because it'll affect what your frequency and channels can be. Once you work on the strategy that we just talked about and you develop, you know, figure out the platforms and the cadence of your posts, establish your goals, figure out how you're going to do engagement, then you're going to go into a technical setup. So with technical setup, you might already have some of this done. You need to create the social media profiles that you're going to use. And that kind of involves a little bit of customization on design and you know, getting the names right and things. With the profile create, we'll talk about that in a little bit, but you also need to do access control and figure out some of your analytics configuration. Like Ali mentioned, it's good to have those set up ahead of time to measure how well you're doing. And all of that kind of goes into correctly configured tools for you to execute on these things. That folds into content development as well. So you know, at the same time you're doing technical setup, you can start your content development and figure out your content plan. That involves not just writing posts, but also involves graphic design and sometimes, you know, video editing, production kind of stuff for different types of content. And then it also involves, you know, curating those external thought leadership articles that Ali mentioned, like, you know, what kind of information is interesting to your potential customers as well that you could share from someone else. All of that should lead into really consistent, on-brand, valuable content for your customers. Once you have all of that together, you're going to want to review your analytics with some regularity. And as Ali mentioned, keep at least a month ahead of time. Especially for clients where I know it's going to be a grind. It's going to be really difficult because of staffing or whatever, or when I've worked with them, I'll say, let's set up some evergreen posts and let's put them for the next 6 months or something. Let's get way in front of it. And then we at least have some consistent posting for that 6-month period. So if you're feeling like you're not sure that you're going to be able to get your posts written ahead of time, you might want to scope that even further out. Noting that if you have evergreen content set to post at a certain time, it's good to review that from time to time. There are some horror stories of major brands kind of creating some PR issues by posting something that just so happens to correlate with current events in a negative way. And so if there's anything really big going on nationally, it's good to check and make sure that you didn't write your scheduled posts in a weird way.
Grant, I know we talked about finding an example for this, and
yeah,
didn't have time, but I just saw one because I got a brochure, and it's not a social ad, but it's just an example of what he's talking about. I got a brochure or a catalog from Continental Diamond, where I shop for jewelry occasionally, and there's a huge 2-page ad of Everson Griffin, talking about his love for Continental Diamond. I don't know if any of you follow the Vikings. We're big Vikings fans in my house, but Everson Griffin had a bit of a, I don't know, just a bad moment on social, kind of a mental breakdown. And he's in the press, not in a great way right now. He was talking about a gun. And so I know Continental Diamond didn't know any of that when they put this huge ad spread together.
Yeah.
So that's an example, right? Of like not knowing what can happen with what you're going to
somebody needs to be watching it. Like if you have some, have just someone who knows like, oh, you know what? I think we wrote something that might relate to this thing I just saw on the news or something like that. So so good to keep a couple of pairs of eyes on that one. And then every 6 months or so or sooner, take a look at your analytics and see if, is our strategy working? Do we need to adjust it? How do we need to, are we able to achieve these goals, or are we kind of far behind on them? So just some more details on the technical setup. I'm sorry. I almost put a slide in here of somebody with like a headache because this is a lot of detail, but I stopped myself. So when you're creating profiles, don't register them to like, you wouldn't want to set up like Grant's personal email address or Grant's company email address as the main contact email for your social media profile. It's much, much better to use something like an info @ or an admin @ for your email address that's not tied to a specific person, but is recoverable through your org. That way, if somebody leaves the company unexpectedly, you can recover your social media. It's really important to do that. And I've seen this happen with companies where we've had to like try to call LinkedIn because we get locked out, or any of those kinds of things. It's just really good to have a contingency plan for when those things change hands. It's okay to park some social media platforms, even if it's not directly in the strategy, to kind of keep an eye on it. I wouldn't say you have to like go and create like for every new social media platform, go and park your name. But for at least some of the main ones, it's good to have an official kind of channel, even if you're not really planning on leveraging it right away. Make sure to use properly sized images and things for banners and that they align with your brand. We'll talk about tools a little bit later, and I'll mention some resources to help with that. For access control, make sure only those who need the access get it. This shouldn't be like everybody in the company has access to post things, because it's just a lot to wrangle if you have staff changes. Make sure that everyone's trained to know when they're posting to their personal Facebook versus the company Facebook or the right Twitter profiles and stuff, to make sure that if they do have access, they're not showcasing opinions that are not opinions of the organization on their social media platform. And also make sure to add the stuff to an offboarding process. I just saw it a couple days ago where somebody who had left the company 2 years ago still had admin access to a LinkedIn page. And it's easy to miss. So just make sure it's part of that offboarding process. We'll talk about the API stuff a little bit later. And for analytics configuration, you'll want to install tracking cookies. And then also create UTM codes. So UTM codes is a way to track like a specific campaign from something. So you could say every link coming from LinkedIn to your website is a little bit easier to track. With the install tracking cookies, if desired, when you install the tracking cookies, you also need to update your privacy policy. And I'm not a lawyer, but you should really probably do that. If you are using any kind of analytics software, you are tracking some information from the user unless you're really specific about some things. And so just note that that does affect some other areas of your site.
Okay, so once you've got everything set up and you've got all your analytics figured out, even though it's kind of confusing, it's important, right? But then it's time to talk about content and what we're going to say. Before you launch any type of social channel or presence, I recommend having a good 3 months worth of content ready. Now that's going to depend on whether you're posting once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week, how much content you're going to need. And it can be anything, right? Do you have a blog? Blog posts are great to post on social. They give people that thought leadership, they provide value, and they showcase the skill and technique of your company. Infographics, create little, like the slide I did earlier with the bubbles and the stats, things like that are great for social. Create infographics, share them. Videos are actually the best. As you can see the stat there, 85% of marketers rank short form videos as the most effective type of social media content this year. So even if it's just you on your iPhone talking about something, or a little video you create for a Vimeo or a YouTube channel that talks about what you do, people love to watch videos on social, not long videos, but short form videos. So when you're building out your content strategy, video is a very important part to include. Testimonials or case studies from your clients are another super powerful form of content. People talking about the great work you did for them and how you helped their business is only going to help your business more. And videos are a great way to share testimonials. If you can get your client to record it, it's great. I highly recommend it. Contests, surveys, polls, things where people can interact. If you can give away a little, fill out this survey, do a contest, the winner gets a prize, things like that are great every once in a while to just kind of keep your page fresh and help people interact. And of course, company news, announcements. If you hire someone, if you're looking for someone, if you acquire a company, if you add a new service, if you add a new product, things like that are all going to go into the content you share. And of course, it should always be a mix of, and I'll talk about this here, but the content should always be a mix of content you create and content you share from others. So I think that's the number one rule we have on this page is share, and provide value. Sorry, I skipped one. Every post, every piece of content, everything you put out there to your followers should provide some sort of value to them. Whether it's a thought leadership article where they learned something they maybe didn't know, whether it's a link to an article on your site that might be beneficial to them, if it's just a piece of information or a webinar, whatever. It's always provide value any way that you're going to help them with their business, because at the end of the day, that's what they're looking for. And one way to prove that you're not just solely out on social to try and sell your stuff is to share content from others. Retweet, reshare, find articles that other people have written in your industry, but that your followers and your clients would care about, and put that on your page. Tag the publications, tag the people who write the articles. It's just going to help bolster your presence and prove that legitimacy of you being a well-rounded person, company on a social presence who's not just here to make money, even though, let's face it, that's what everyone's doing, but you're trying to also provide value, right? You want to help your followers, your customers, whoever you're communicating with, get what they need from social. Number 3, hashtags. So hashtags are very important, but it's its own strategy. Don't just make up hashtags. If you're launching a new product, for example, and you want to create a hashtag for that, that's fine. But just know that the point of hashtags is to make you show up when people search for certain content on a social channel. For example, if someone goes on LinkedIn or Instagram and they search healthcare data, like I'm looking for healthcare data software, what are people saying about it? You need to make sure that you have the right hashtags that are being used in the industry so that you show up, if that makes sense. So it's an entire strategy. Don't just make up hashtags, essentially is what I'm getting at. Do some research to figure out what are the hashtags being used frequently with the things I talk about, and include them in your posts. Yeah, and I think one thing to add to that one is, like, even for, because I did social for Hall of Fame 2 or 3 years ago. And our hashtag we were using for Hall of Fame was for something else entirely. It was like, it wasn't anything. It was like I think it was basketball related. I'm not sure. But it was very much like not the Hall of Fame that we all wanted it to be. And so there's some mixing of the content when you went to that hashtag. So you want to make sure to make sure no one else is using it, and make sure it's the right one. Yeah, and if you decide to create a custom hashtag for, let's say, a product or a webinar or a skill set you have, that's fine, but you have to use it every time and make sure your employees, anyone who's doing social, is using that hashtag every time. Your vendors are using it. So eventually it'll start to create buzz, right? And get a following instead of just using it once or twice.
Put it on your materials, encourage the audience members to use it and stuff, all that fun stuff.
Yes. Always include what we marketers like to call a CTA, which stands for calls to action. It's great to post little nuggets of information or fun photos and such, but when you're using social for business, this is a way that you're providing value, right? Is what are they going to do based on what you post? So you wrote a great article about this, give them the link to it, right? Always drive them somewhere. If it's your site, if it's an external site, if it's a webinar, if it's an event, if it's registration for something, always give them a place to go that keeps them interacting with you. So CTAs usually come in the form of a link, like visit this or register here or do this, but just make sure you're always giving them that direction of something to do so that they can continue to interact with you.
It makes it measurable too. Like without that, it's really hard to know whether or not anything is being successful, right? So it's important from that angle as well.
Totally. And create visual consistency and cohesiveness with your images and your brand. So there's certain social channels, obviously like Instagram, where you have to have an image. That's the point of the post. It's image based, and then the caption is secondary. But on things that most people use, most B2B businesses are using LinkedIn and Facebook for their social, try to include an image. I recommend with my clients and the ones I use, we use an image on every single post, whether it's the image that pops up from a link. Let's say you're going to share an article from Forbes and their pre-populated image for that article pops up. That's fine. That's great. But if it's your content, your blog post, your case study, your differentiators you're sharing, use an image. And I recommend, Grant will get into this later, using Canva, because you can create little templates that have your brand colors. You can just change the text every time, but so that when people come to these social media pages, it looks like your company. It feels like you, it looks professional, it's branded, the colors are there, the fonts are the same as on your website or on your other marketing materials. And then it really just gives it that whole feel of like, okay, this company is dedicated to this. They're telling me what I want to hear. They're giving me value, links, and look how pretty their posts look. It's kind of
see the NAWBO Minnesota channels for examples. We've really been working hard with the awareness committee to try and brand those more consistently. And I think it's made a really big difference.
Absolutely. So a big part of executing your post is putting the plan together. We've talked about this a bit, but stay ahead of your posts. Create a content calendar with topics, write the posts in there, include the link, the image, so you can see it all planned out for at least a month at a time, and you're just prepared, and then get them scheduled. For me, the rule of thumb I usually use is I try to have all posts for the following month drafted by like the third week of the month. And then if anyone needs to review, look at them, provide feedback, you have that week to do that. And then the final month, you get them scheduled. Most of the time people are using a tool to schedule their posts, which again, we'll talk about later in the tools section, but you want to have it planned and ready so you're not having to wake up in the morning and go, oh crap, I got to go put that post on LinkedIn. With social media, your best friend is going to be a scheduling tool and a content calendar. So stay a few weeks ahead. If resources change, like let's say there's a marketing intern or a marketing associate at your company who's in charge of social and writing the post and they're going to be gone for a week, you have to plan for that. It's going to have to adjust because social media is one of those things. It keeps going and you have to keep going. And if you don't, it's going to mess with your entire strategy. And including different types of posts and sharing articles from other sources and external thought leadership will make this less daunting. Not everything has to be some beautiful piece of content you've created just for this post. Utilize what you have. You know, most people have a lot of content in their back pocket on their site that they don't even realize. Part of the content I build for most clients is like, you know, next week we're going to talk about your differentiators, right? The week after that, we'll do a post about your process. The week after that, we'll do a post about, you know, your mission and your values, things like that. It's just good to get it planned, get it in the calendar, have it ready to go. Okay, engagement is, again, we've kind of hammered this home already, but if people are going to be on your posts and interacting with your posts, commenting, liking, you have to respond. Most people would respect a response within 24 hours. It should and could be even shorter if this is like a negative response. Establish a designated team or a person who deals with the comments and responding, and like have that chain of command documented so you know if someone comes in and complains about a product, okay, send that to Jerry, that's his department, he'll put on the response, and have a document of canned responses ready to go. Even if it's, you know, something, someone's just praising your business, have that canned response where you say, thanks, we'll be in touch, or thanks, great to hear from you. So it's just easy to do.
Is the slide changing for you?
I think there's a delay on my end.
We're on in-house versus vendor management.
Okay, so should you do social yourself? Should you hire someone to do it? That's like the toss up, because, and this is where we get to that headache part, right? It's daunting. There's a lot of work. There's a lot to it. If you can't use a vendor, that's fine. You can manage your social in-house. Many companies do it. Just make sure that you're adjusting those expectations. If it's you and like 3 people at your office and only one of you is going to work on the social, maybe do 1 post a week on 1 channel, right? Just do things that you can actively accomplish without feeling like it's daunting, right? But it's still, again, quality and consistency over quantity and frequency. If you're posting once every 2 weeks, but it's some great nugget of information or some podcast people can't wait to hear, that's awesome, right? Just make sure it's consistent so they know what to expect. And if you need a vendor, they can come in and do everything, or they can do one thing, right? They can set your strategy up, figure out all those audiences, channels for you, your engagement strategy. They can build the accounts. They can make them look pretty. They can write all your content. They can schedule it for you. They can do your engagement and respond to those posts, especially the ones that are really like mundane and everyday. And they can run the analytics and give you reports. Okay, this month, this kind of content did great. This content was not a great performer, things like that. They can kind of, at least most of them, right, can come in where you need, or they can do it all. So it's just something to keep in mind. But don't just like think we'll just like have the intern do social media. Like that's
They're
great.
a Gen Zer. We'll just have them do it.
Yeah.
They've known it for so long. Yeah, it's.
You want to dedicate a team, an employee.
Yeah. Totally. I've definitely heard that suggestion before. On like, we'll just have this Gen Zer who doesn't really have experience with the business do it, and it's it can be rough. That took a while to untangle.
Yeah.
And just for time check, we're at 12:48. I'm going to try and speed through these. Unfortunately, this will chew in a little bit of the Q&A time, but I don't know if we can leave it open a little bit longer. But I have some time just after 1 o'clock, so I can stick around a little bit longer. So access and credentials. So I just want to call this out for managing these things. LinkedIn and Facebook work differently than Instagram and Twitter. And so Facebook and LinkedIn, if you're going to have admins, they need to use their personal Facebook or LinkedIn account. And within those, you create the page and you set up access. So when you offboard someone, you need to go into that tool and remove them. Because just removing them from your Active Directory or from your email system is not going to kick them out. They will continue to have access until you remove them through that tool. And if you no longer have a person who has access, like via LinkedIn, you're stuck. We had one get locked out that way because the intern was asked to set up the LinkedIn profile for like an internal, like a DBA for a company that I was working with. And they lost they did something odd and we could no longer recover it. So with Twitter and Instagram, I'd recommend using something like LastPass. That's something that we've actually implemented here with NAWBO to make the account recovery a lot easier. And I think Jackie's really been enjoying it. So, and that allows you to utilize those things with multiple people having access, but it is a little bit tricky when it's like, who posted this thing that we weren't supposed to say? It's kind of harder to track with shared access versus with one of the other platforms. For scheduling services, they're great. Things like Hootsuite and Later and Tailwind. They're really great, but you can't completely rely on them. There's certain things like creating events, doing certain kinds of special posts like polls and things. You kind of have to go to the actual platform and do the post from there. So when you're learning a new tool, you also need to learn the actual, like the social media platform, excuse me, as well for those bits. And things like hashtags, they generally work better right through like LinkedIn or Facebook. But I also haven't tried every one of these, so I don't know if maybe somebody's figured it out, but it can be a little tricky. For design software, so I've been teaching Adobe classes for the last like 5 years or so, and it's way harder than everyone expects. Everyone goes into those classes and like, yeah, everyone uses Photoshop. How hard could it be? And the answer is it's extremely hard. It's not a very fun thing to have to learn, and it's very expensive. I think one license is like, I think it's like $1,200 a year or something like that for the Creative Cloud, or $600, something like that. I think $1,200. And so it's a lot. I would recommend for most teams to just use Canva. Canva is very useful. You can do almost all of the social media things you need to do through Canva. There's just a few select tasks that are best done through the other kind of design software. And so when you're looking at getting some of those things done, maybe that's a good thing to send through like a Fiverr or an Upwork, or finding a vendor to do a few quick tasks as opposed to trying to train internally for that. Because it's a lot to learn that stuff. Canva has a few cons, a few things that it's not great at, but I think it's getting better all the time. They've been adding improvements, I think, like every quarter. So worth checking out. And the Pro account gives you access to a bunch of stock photos. So you could cancel your iStock subscription as well if you are going through Canva Pro. Gonna just continue on through analytics. Okay, so this is really quick. How these analytics work when you're going from a social media platform to your website, or when a user is going, like taking a link from social media to your website is going to have tracking cookies on it. And these tracking cookies, when someone loads them onto the page, that sends a little message back to LinkedIn and Facebook or your Google Analytics to say, hey, this person accessed this page. Now, the trick with these is that if they have Firefox or Opera or any kind of ad blocking, those cookies aren't going to work at all. You can't get any data from them on that path from LinkedIn or from Facebook to your website. You're not going to get the loading or anything like that. And so when we're looking at how to set up analytics for things, that's where the CTA thing is so important, not just on the social media platform, but when they get to a page on your website, you should have them do a thing that is trackable. So when you're looking at like, maybe they enter in their email address, or they download a thing, or provide some information, or preferably buy something from you there, and you can track that interaction then once they've completed that sort of thing. But the thing with a lot of the analytic data is that unless you really have a lot of people and it's really well established, you can't trust the data implicitly. You can't fully trust what you're getting. It should be more directional on things, and should be like, is this strategy working? How is that going? As opposed to like, the numbers were, you had 6 fewer people register this month, so that obviously something is wrong, where it could just be a fluke because you don't have enough people going through the process. Something else to watch out for, and this is, as you go through things, you might hear some metrics from people about how things are performing. And just as a business owner, it's really important to know that there are some metrics that are kind of not actually useful. When you're looking at percentage increase in traffic, that's kind of a tricky one sometimes. Like we have, if you have 90 more people, might not actually be that much for a particular post, but it's a 900% increase. And so if you're getting a lot of those kinds of things, just make sure to drill down with your vendor or with your employee and be like, okay, what does this actually mean? what are the actual numbers? Those are a lot more effective, because it can stem a lot from like, I don't want to tell my boss that we only have 2 more followers this month, but actually that's great. And so knowing that, like, even though the numbers are kind of small, I'd rather hear correct, accurate numbers than ones that make me feel like it's working. So just an important thing to call out there. So yeah, many of the numbers aren't going to be actually exact. It's, anything non-conversion, it should just be directional, because there might be, especially if you have a small sample set, it might be totally random. It might not have anything to do with, and it could be just that everyone who is using Firefox had the B on your A/B test, and therefore none of their traffic showed up to your analytics system. But it can still be really useful for a lot of stuff, and can help just prove that things are working. But you really want to do the conversion. Conversion metrics are going to be your best way to measure things, because that's, it can kind of, if you get people's money through your thing, that's telling you that it's working. If they're willing to actually buy stuff or provide their information to you via a quote tool or an email sign up. We did it. It's before 1 o'clock. we were talking earlier, like, oh man, it's kind of a lot of slides. It's a lot to talk about. So we only have a couple minutes before 1 o'clock. I did book out an extra little bit of time. So if people need to stay on and ask a few more questions, happy to stick around.
Are you going to be sharing the slide deck after the fact or no?
Yes, I did. I sent the link to Jackie. Yep.
Okay, great.
But I did so right before noon, so hopefully she got it on time.
Okay, great.
Is there a possibility to have you all come back and do a little bit more deeper dive? I think that you are providing information that warrants that, so you don't feel rushed. It's just an idea. This is Carol from the programming committee.
Hey, Carol.
Hey.
I don't think before the end of the year for sure.
No, I understand that, but I
yeah.
mean into a future.
Yeah.
It's just something to consider. It's just a thought. Because there's a few of us out here who don't have a company. We are a company of one. And so
Sure.
It's just something to consider, to deep dive a little bit more in like a 2.0 for those of us who are active on social media in whatever capacity. I think the information about the analytics, like really understanding what that is, the UTM, really understanding what that means. We hear all these words in language. We're a world right now. Everybody loves words, but they don't know what Sam, mostly they don't know what the crab apples they're even talking about.
Absolutely.
Right? And
yeah.
so I love how both of you worked in tangent as far as like really breaking this down, right? To get beyond the fluff and the floof. This is a whole different job. We understand that. But it's like, what are the parts as business owners that we need to watch for, right? To keep ourselves in check if we hire a vendor or not.
Yeah.
That's really the most important components to keep everything moving as far as the engine that this vehicle, right, that we are driving. So we can check underneath the hood as well as drive it.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Grant.
I was going to suggest with Jackie, I don't know if there's still time to do it, but if there could be a question on the survey afterwards, or maybe a follow-up thing that just asks, if we were to do a part 2, what information would be most important to you?
Okay, great
or
idea.
Something like that. Go ahead, Allie. Sorry about that.
To say, and we toyed with that idea, right, Grant, of like being like, this is kind of the overview, but it's still like a lot.
It is.
Diving into sections of it, right? Like, how do you build the strategy? Or, like a learning lab that's just about doing paid social campaigns.
Absolutely.
And then a whole one with just Grant talking about analytics, right? And like all the stuff he has in his brain, right? Because it's a part of the process, right? And we wanted to touch everything today, but I completely agree. A few of these elements could use a deeper dive. Absolutely.
So I have a question for everybody, because listening to this, I'll tell you that one of the things, the direction the board has given is, these learning labs are by members, for members. And I think we've opened them up to some non-members for a fee, but we've really had the direction to have, like one company do one learning lab a year, just because we want to try and vary content and give everybody, an opportunity. One of the questions I have is, because Grant and Allie and many of you, Carol, you've done learning labs, are giving of your professional expertise. Would people be open to a deep dive presented by these guys that's at a cost, not an expensive cost, but a nominal cost, so that we're also helping our members, build business, and we're kind of, creating some different opportunities rather than, people continuing to give a deep expertise. I'm just wondering, would people be open? I thought I saw Carol nod yes.
Yeah, I have experienced that with Lady Boss Virtual, and we deep dove into a couple of pieces, a 90-minute at like $20-25, right? And it was, there were 20 to 25 people who showed up. I don't think that's too shabby. You know what I'm saying? As far as folks who wanted to get into that deeper work, to really ask those questions, So I think it's an idea. I never thought about it, but yeah, it's an idea, and also, who else in the NAWBO universe also are experts in this space as well, right? So it's just not relying upon Allie and Grant, to spread the wealth. There may be experts within NAWBO that, could lend to this as well. So that it becomes bigger than, what I'm saying, to really create a social media expert community. I don't know, I'm just making it up, but talking in the moment like I do.
Yeah. Well, let us do a little more pondering on that. But I think the good news, Grant and Allie, is people want to hear more from you. So
definitely
that's certainly a successful learning lab.
Definitely so. Definitely so. Mm-hmm.
Is there any more questions before we move on?
There was one from Megan in the chat.
Any thoughts on what kind of format is easiest for a content calendar and editorial planning? I'm always searching for something better.
So I replied in the chat, but I'll reiterate it here, is honestly, I use just like Google Sheets to plan it. And I know it's like the same as Excel, whatever, but it really works best for just having a format where I can see everything in front of me in columns, like the date, the channel, the post topic, the post copy, the link, the image, and you can put it all and kind of see it all in front of you. And for someone like me who's going to send that to a client to review, or if you have to send it to someone, maybe like someone else at your company, or just for your own solopreneur business to keep it organized, I think Google Sheets is good. You can also use the scheduling tools that you're going to use to automate and get your posts posted every day. Sometimes have that same scheduling feature, but I still create it somewhere else first, like for my sense of sanity.
It's a good common language just in spreadsheets. And that's something that I recognize not everyone has like a high skill level in, but it's a really good spot for it. And it's easy to export as well from that into systems like Hootsuite and other things.
And it's easy. I'm horrible with numbers and math. I mean, I'm a writer, and spreadsheets used to be my downfall, but Google Sheets I can do, and I've figured it out.
Grant, I have a quick question. This is Regina Barr. And so with using some of the schedulers like Hootsuite, et cetera, I thought I had read something that they're viewed differently in some of like the algorithms in terms of getting placement. Is that true, or?
It's kind of tough to like sift through a lot of the algorithm stuff. Anytime you're dealing with SEO as well, you're dealing with this, where it's a lot of pseudoscience. Like they don't actually tell us what their algorithms are or what they do. And so I couldn't, without doing some like pretty deep research on that, I wouldn't be able to respond very intelligently. Like maybe I could see them doing something like that. I know some posts, like if it says like sent with Hootsuite, that's not great. But it's definitely, I'll be Googling it later and
Okay.
and let you know. But it could have an effect, but likely those organizations are going to be lobbying the social platform to not do that.
Okay. I just wondered because I mean, I use Hootsuite, and I just wondered if that has impacts.
I would
It's okay
experiment
to-
yourself, actually.
Okay.
That's what I would do, is I would do similar kinds of posts. I'd do like, maybe for a month, every other post switches between the native app and then your scheduler, and see if
Okay.
they have different, if you do it for a month, maybe 2 months, if you don't have that many followers, like you should be able to get at least some statistical significance that every single one through Hootsuite performed worse or something.
Okay. That's a great idea. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions in chat? If you have an example you'd be willing to share. So Megan, you're asking for an example of like a scheduling Google Sheet.
Yeah.
I don't have one on hand.
I do.
Allie
mean,
does.
I can share my screen. I have
Sure.
one open.
They're I would say like you're going to find 100 of them on a single Google search, right? Like there's a lot of really good content out there about like how, differing opinions about how to set up a social calendar spreadsheet. Yeah, if you're comfortable sharing that, Allie, then we could take a look at that. But
Sure. So here's an example of a Google Sheet, right? This is a company that I'm a collaborator in called NAWBO-MN, and I help them with their social. So as you can see, there's a month, we've got our date, we've got our topic, we've written the copy. Because we're not using Twitter, I don't have this, but usually I'll have a comment or a column right after the post for character count that automatically counts it. So I know if my Twitter count's going to be over. The image here, usually I'll have the actual image pasted in here or screenshotted in here so my client can see, okay, that's what's going to go with it on the post. And then what we're linking to, and then an area for them to provide notes, which I have asked them not to do, and instead just like interact with the Google Sheets via the comment tool. Like you can tag people and reply to comments and provide feedbacks and things like that. So this is just an example of how I do it. For October, there was everything, and then November, and now I'm working on December stuff. So this, I mean, it's not pretty, right? It's just a spreadsheet, but this is how I do it.
awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. I'd had it open just because that's kind of what I do all day.
Any other questions before we shut it down for the day? Perfect. Thank you everyone so much for your time, and let us know. I'm excited to read the survey results about what part 2 should include. So
I agree. Thank you for the time today. We appreciate it.
Thank
Great
you.
program. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. This is great.
Great. Take care, everyone. Happy holidays.
yeah, happy holidays.